So I want to welcome Michelle Miller today to the podcast, and she is with Centered Reality, and again, I believe that is a yoga studio. Am I correct?
It's a holistic yoga studio,
Okay.
so it is certainly not just a yoga studio.
Well, I'm a novice to yoga, so I
Yeah.
guess go ahead and I always like to have everybody kind of walk through their story, like their origination story. Like, how did you get interested in doing holistic yoga? How did you get interested, or what? How did you get to where you are now?
Well, a little back history. I was in an automobile accident in 2009. It was pretty severe, and at the time, I was just seeking traditional medicine. And after several years of being under the care of a whole medical team, I realized that I was deteriorating rather than improving.
Wow.
And so was at church praying I feel like it was my last prayer of like, why is this happening? And immediately God told me something, and I didn't know what it meant at the time, but intuitively I knew what it meant. And it was as quickly as you have lost your physical vision, I can restore a spiritual vision beyond your belief. And I didn't know what spiritual vision was exactly. So I just sat with that because it was loud. It
So
got my
you had no
attention.
prior knowledge of anything
Never knew what yoga.
non-traditional, I guess I would call
I
it.
was in Catholic school my whole life. I knew what prayer was. I knew what sacraments were and going to church Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I knew what that was, but I didn't know what yoga, meditation, or a spiritual site was.
So this was a real like 180 flip.
Yes. And
Wow.
so shortly after that, I went home and I sat with that. So in that sitting, in that stillness, like we're told,
Correct.
the answers started flowing in. And it was just sit here and envision what you want for your life, right? Later down the road, I realized that that's called meditation. It's called meditative prayer, the power of the mind to perceive what you want and to bring it into action. And so for the first 6 months after that, I sat there in meditation. Now, whenever I was younger in high school, I was a powerlifting athlete, right? And I had great success in my powerlifting career due to this thing that I learned. And it was just another intuitive thing that happened. Before I would lift, I would envision myself lifting. And it didn't matter how much the weight was compared to my body size, my strength, my ability. I saw myself do it and I would do it.
So you already had some insight in this, but you didn't see that until this all happened. Is that what you're saying?
I did that as a naive high schooler that just wanted to win a trophy, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool about that when you do meditate is that you start going back and I always say nothing in life happens without a reason. There's like a synchronicity to that.
Absolutely.
And so once you start going back, and I can remember one of my favorite doctors is the name Dr. DeMartini, and he talks about he gets to a certain point where he had a vision for his life through a meditation, and he goes back and he starts putting all those pieces of this puzzle of his childhood together that got him to that moment.
It was as if I prepared my whole life for this moment, right? To overcome this, what could have been a catastrophe, but was actually just a greater learning experience.
Isn't that crazy? It gives
is.
me goosebumps. I don't
It
know how
is.
that works. So where has that, so you've gone through that. So where did that translate to, or how did it get to where you are today? So do you have a studio or do you have a group, or how does that all work I assume it's a business?
Yes, we recently moved from Texas about a year ago, and through some, we called it golden gossip. It's where we sit together in meditation, me and my husband, and we talk as if these things have already happened for us. And you're overhearing people talk about what they see you doing in your life after you've told them, this is where I see myself. If there were no limits, this is where I see myself in 1 year. So then the two people will pretend like, hey, did you see John in Nashville? He's producing records with some of the greatest names in the music industry. And so as you're sitting there and you're relaxed and you're listening to this golden gossip about your life, you begin to feel as if that is a real experience for you. And so coming to Nashville was our golden gossip a year previously. And so we didn't know how it was going to happen because that's all irrelevant. You know, we didn't know how it was going to happen. We just knew that that's where we wanted to see ourselves.
When you knew it would happen.
And we knew it would happen,
Right.
right? And so a year later, we're in Nashville. He's working with, Grammy Award-winning songwriters.
Isn't that wild? That's just, yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard to imagine
it is.
how that whole process unfolds. And it's neat to be in that and be aware of it and how that all happens. And I guess, as people go through life, most people don't get to experience that. So how does that work with what you're doing now? Are you bringing other people in through the meditation to bring that awareness?
There is this...
Because I'll be honest with you, with meditation, and again, I've been in healthcare for 34 years, and I've told patients that, you should consider or look into doing some meditation just to calm, de-stress,
Right.
calm the mind. And of course you get that look like, oh no, I can't do the meditation. That's
right.
like religious or something.
I'll say that I was fortunate in that I became really good at it really easily. And so I've been able to benefit from the power of meditation. But one stumbling block that I've had ongoing with clients, people I love, people I want to help, because ultimately my goal is to relieve suffering for others,
Of course, yeah.
is that there's this invisible barrier. And really, until you get past that barrier, or you set time aside and do take action on it, you won't yield.
Right. You have to, I always tell patients sometimes you have to get out of your own way.
You do.
You're in your own way. And sometimes they don't realize that or see that. And it may be invisible, but like you said, there's a something.
It's real.
It's real, yeah.
It's real. It becomes tangible. It's an idea that becomes tangible. And that is the heartbreaking part for myself, because I know the potential there. And I know, and I can see it in people's stories, how bad they want their suffering to end, or how bad they want something just significant to change. And
well, and I think that's
you have to trust the process.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing that you brought up is the process. And you can give them everything. It's the same in my business. You can tell them or show them to do this, do that. It will change. You will change. But until they can take that, I guess it's a leap of faith and start to experience it for themselves, it sets up a roadblock.
And that's a roadblock that I think a lot of people, and so I think for a lot of people it is that, well, I need to see it before I believe it.
That's, fortunately, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. And so the best students I have are ones that trust me before they knew anything about me being a yoga instructor. They just trust my judgment. They trust my character. They trust my values. And then they'll heed, any kind of advice that I'm giving them. But if you don't know me, or if you are skeptical of people in general, sometimes I'm just not the right person for you right now.
Correct. Yeah, what a great point. I know my introduction, I think, into meditation goes back a number of years. I think it was Deepak Chopra was where I saw him speak at some of our chiropractic conventions. And the thing that I still remember him talking about is that you have to calm the mind. He said the wisdom or the intelligence is in the silence.
Right.
And he said the same thing he says in music. He says, there's only, you probably know better, there's only 12 notes. He says the music is not in the notes, it's in the silence in between the notes. And I think that holds so true as I've experienced and just trying to quiet the mind in modern times. I think we have a bigger hurdle than ever before because there's so many distractions out there. So how do you walk people through to get rid of the distractions? Do you make them throw away their phones, or they just have to find their own way?
I think a misconception that we have is that meditation is separate from life. The goal, I believe, and also through my own teaching spiritually, are that life is supposed to be meditative, right? And what that might look like, this is an example I like to use because I'm a mom. And so a lot of moms are like, I'm just too busy with my kids. How do I have time for meditation? Meditation is just awareness and being present, right? It's being present with whatever is happening right now, right? A lot of times something that we do, we build resentments when we're doing them because we have a story that we tell in our mind about this thing. It could be doing dishes, it could be doing laundry, it could be doing something that we cannot find the gratitude for at the moment. And so what meditation and living in meditation looks like for me is never leaving the meditation. And so I'm washing dishes and I'm saying, God, I'm grateful for this food that I'm able to wash off these plates. And I'm grateful for the wisdom of these bubbles to be scrubbing, right? Scrubbing all this food and replenishing these plates with their cleanliness so that we can use them again tomorrow. I'm grateful for the way that this water is relaxing on my nervous system as I hear it flow from the water spout. Just you're giving your kids a bath. This right here, these giggles, these splashes, this mess, that's the sound of love.
And it's the awareness of that.
Yes.
Otherwise, it just happens.
I mean, we can look at the
same
same puddle on the floor and say, look at this mess. No, that's an expression of love. That's an expression of love. Your kids are loving this water. They're loving their bath time. You washing their hair, feeling all these bubbles, growing in their head and seeing like the worries of today wash off their body. Like that is a meditation.
So it's kind of like a positive attitude or an attitude of gratitude as
You're
much or
living
as
life.
often as we can, correct?
Yes.
So how do you translate that to your kids to make it positive to clean up their mess? I'm just joking.
Well, I mean, that's first and foremost, this is an important question because this is a question that a lot of moms struggle with, right?
Well, yes, exactly. And dads.
There's balance, right? First, we have to balance the things that we have authority over with as much responsibility as we're willing to uptake.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
If I am setting my kids up for failure by giving them authority over more than they're able to be responsible for, it's going to be a bad experience.
Very true. Very true.
So in our household, we're very aware of how much authority we give to our kids, right? And that can be in material possessions, that can be in time management. All of that stuff is important. And we don't overload them. We have a fair expectation of what you can expect from a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 20-year-old.
Right.
And so whenever they want more or they want to take on more, we have this conversation of where can you fit these responsibilities into your life?
Gotcha. So how do you see this affecting overall health? Again, part of what we are discussing about is this jigsaw puzzle of health. How do you see, the meditation, the yoga, how do you see that all kind of fitting in? Whether it's, I think meditation, I look at meditation more as a focus. Mm-hmm. If you are focusing, like I said, meditation to me is I'm focusing on the positive, the gratitude, but you can also meditate on the bad.
You could.
So I guess, how does it all fit into the whole jigsaw puzzle?
So going back to this car accident, whenever I started meditating, because I wasn't physically capable at the time. At that time, I was having 20 grand mal seizures a day. I was incapacitated, right? I knew how to get strong. I did it my whole entire life. I couldn't do it now. So what I did is what I could do. That's a principle that I love to share with everybody. Do what you can do. Sometimes when you're at your lowest low, I can water myself and I can master that. I can nourish myself. I can master that. And I can get enough sleep. And that's a foundation for a good life.
Amen. Amen to that.
So whenever I was at my weakest point, I would envision myself going to the gym, getting out of my car, putting my hand on the door, opening it up, going to the locker room, working through the reps, and something miraculous happened. After about 6 months, I started building muscle mass. I started finding more function in my hands that were not working. My neural pathways were reconnecting just through the meditation. And I went from completely incapacitated. In a year, you couldn't tell that I had ever been in a tremendous car accident, that I ever had a brain bleed, that I ever had spinal cord injuries, that I was ever suffering from epilepsy. You couldn't tell.
Incredible. I mean, that's absolutely incredible to me. That's the power that we all possess. It's just the question is, how do we tap into it? And I hear these stories, and I don't know if you're familiar, but there's actually a Dr. Dispenza. He was in a very similar situation. He talks about this, is that the mind does not, I forget how he said it, but the mind cannot tell the difference between something actually done versus what he vividly imagines.
So that's great that you brought that up, because about 4 years after I had started to become functioning and I started to get my life back, I picked up that book, Becoming Superhuman.
Did you really?
And I started reading through it, and I'm like, my husband had been hearing, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, he's a chiropractor, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but he's a chiropractor.
I didn't know that, but I would tell my husband, oh my gosh, this is what I did. This is what, like, if you took this and you took what I did, this is what I did. And he's sharing it with, I mean, lots of people, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Lots of people.
Worldwide.
And I, it was a validation that I'm not a neuroscientist. I did read a lot of books on the brain, but I'm not a neuroscientist. And so it was validation that there was some truth to my experience, that what I was doing was yielding these results that were miraculous,
Yeah, and I know the principle that comes through our profession quite a bit is that everything occurs from above down, inside out.
Right.
And that's a big part of the chiropractic philosophy. And like I said, the above, of course, is the brain. You have to visualize it, or you can never manifest it without first imagining it. And if you think about many things in life, started out with a single thought.
Everything does.
And that thought is an energy, and that's turning that into a tangible product is basically what you've done. It's kind of like, I guess, the 3D printers.
Right.
It's your life's 3D printer.
That's exactly what it is. And so if you have these barriers that say, well, I can't even imagine myself doing that. Well, you're not going to see it either, right?
Correct.
Not necessarily, unless there's a significant change. But back to that holistic question. One of the principles that I started with is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, the wheel of life. The wheel of life is, it's like the spokes on a bike. Every spoke on a bike is as equally important, because as you're rotating, if one spoke breaks and you hitting that weak spot as you're traveling down on your journey, the supporting spokes beside it are going to start to deteriorate. Before you know it, you're going nowhere, right? Your bike is non-functional. And so that's how our life is. And our spokes and our wheel of life are made up of our profession, our occupation, our spiritual life, our financial life, our environment, the toxins, or what we surround ourselves, both relationship-wise and material-wise, our social life, our eating habits. Like, it's all made up, and all that is equally important. And this assessment that I use, this is the very first thing I give my clients. You rate from 1 to 10 on, is this satisfying? Is this section of your life satisfying? And from 1 to 10, it's just a snapshot right here today. Where could you set up manageable goals to improve the quality of life in this area? And so what the objective is to periodically go back to this wheel of life assessment, retake it, and see if the things that you're putting in place, the habits, are equating to better quality of life.
Making the wheel smoother,
Right.
and taking the bumps out of
But
the wheel.
also making sure that you're not overinflating one area, right?
That's a great point. Yeah.
So,
Because that'll throw it out of balance as well.
right. And so you don't want to just focus on your finances or just focus on your social life, because you're taking that. You only have so many hours in a day. You only have so much energy to expend. So to find balance.
It's a great visual. I mean, I think that's it's
powerful.
Very powerful. Very powerful.
And easy. Like, easy to conceptualize.
It's very easy to visualize that, because who hasn't been on a bicycle?
Right. Who hasn't had a flat tire?
Who hasn't had a flat tire, true.
In life too, right? So
anyways, absolutely.
So that's what I like to give to all of my clients, so that they can really think about, and also it gets you to think. A lot of people don't sit down to just take that overall picture of the health and quality of their life.
Yeah.
And so in yoga, my philosophy as a teacher is to give them to teach them the skill of self-awareness, so that they don't need me.
Oh, that's awesome.
If I ever have a student there too long, it's because I'm not doing my job, And sometimes, you'll see people who like to take on students and they have a hard time letting go because they're invested, overly invested. And the key is to empower them with the tool of self-awareness, because through self-awareness is your ability to connect to God, right? Oh. To sit down and to be a conduit of wisdom.
Above, down,
right,
inside out.
And so when you're asking me about the meditation question and how you move through life, I think of it as a telephone line. I'm connecting directly to God, just like they did with the switchboards, right? What static is on my line? It could be that I'm looking for answers in too many places outside of myself. It could be there's controlling factors in my life, people, jobs, things that are telling me what I should be doing and not allowing me space and time to listen to a higher wisdom. And so my job as an instructor is to make sure that I lead them to self-awareness, but I don't become the static on the line.
I love that concept. That's fantastic. It's very fantastic. So Michelle, do you have a space currently? I know you said you've been here, a year, or you've been here,
yes.
So forth. So do you have a space? How long does a session normally take? Or just give us a little bit of information about how this would all come together if someone was interested
Sure.
in doing a session.
So right now I host a lot of public events. I love clinics. I love packing a short amount of time with wisdom, so that maybe they'll carry home those seeds and plant them when they get home. We have a space out on the West Piney River, 85 acres, nice. Beautiful pavilion that sits on top of the hill. And so I'm a firm believer of utilizing what God's given you. And I've struggled with wanting to rent something so I can have a brick and mortar, but I'm like, no. Be patient, utilize what God has given you. And so last summer we did an event every weekend. We have a 15-foot fresh spring pool in the middle of the Piney River where we're at. So we did a cold plunge.
You're not going to get me to come out and do a cold plunge. I'm sorry.
Actually, we started on a beautiful hike, and it's about a 15, 20-minute hike to the pavilion that we have built out there. So then we did a yoga session on top of the hill under the pavilion, and then we took another hike down to the fresh spring pool, did a cold plunge, and then came in for tea and coffee.
Sounds amazing.
It was just utilizing what we already had, I love the practice of Kundalini yoga. Kundalini yoga is more of, if you look into it, it's like a lot of holistic things, is that there's a way that it's shadow, like forecasted in the shadow of like, don't go there. It's no good, right? Uh-huh. Has not been approved. But what it is, it's a scientific study of yoga. We're talking about breath work. We're talking about sound healing with mantras. We're talking about meridians and energy flow with certain postures, right? And so utilizing sound, utilizing mudras, utilizing certain spinal postures, flexions of the spine, and the meditative mind, quieting the mind, going into these meditative spaces. You put all that together and you have a very powerful prescription for very individualized ailments, right? I like to think of it as prescriptive yoga.
Interesting. And so I think part of that whole process, and I could be wrong about that, but you're kind of opening up. Everybody has to have a different journey. There's a different solution for everybody and everybody's problem. So you're kind of bringing the awareness of how they can solve their own problems. Am I kind of on the right track of that?
That's true. That's true. You literally can look up, I'm having digestive issues, or I'm having a lot of grief. My grandmother just died. You look up and there's a recipe, a prescription for what you do, how many days you do it, how you do it. And it begins to bring relief to the nervous system.
Which that's my business.
Right. So
the nervous system reigns, because if it's the brain obviously sends the signals to everything. And if this isn't right and the signals coming and going are off, you're not going to have overall health. And I think that's where, like we've talked about spiritual health, we talk about meditation. I think that's part of that whole conduit. If we can make sure the static is out of those lines, you're going to express more health. You're going to express everything would be better. There's a better expression of life, right? Quality of life.
And just like anything, you have to do it for a time period. And usually with Kundalini, that's 40 days at least.
Okay.
You'll start with 40 days doing the same practice every day because you're rewiring the brain. You're unplugging old patterns, creating new patterns. And I'm sure as a chiropractor, if you ever looked into it, you'd be fascinated because it is very scientifically proven that these things are effective and they do work.
The part that I always laugh about when I talk to patients, and it's no different than like with meditation, with yoga, acupuncture, and they're like, oh, that's non-scientific. I'm like, it's been around for 5,000 years. I think they have some clinical clinical studies to this. It's not just by happen chance, or it never would have survived for 5,000 years. And so there is a value, big value to that. And I just think it's more of our Western culture that kind of sets that aside type of thing. But I think there's tremendous value, and it's been proven over the centuries.
Right. And just a little debunk. Yoga is the longest lasting spiritual practice in all of history. Now, I will say almost every religion has adopted pieces of it and incorporated into their religious rituals and practices, good or bad, right? Whatever your perspective is on that. A lot of people are willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
True.
And I just don't subscribe to that. Okay. There are people or things that we may not believe in or may not support that will take something and use it for unintended or I mean, maybe they have their own reasoning and I just don't understand.
True.
But it is its own thing, and it's been adopted by a lot because it works.
Right. And I think like you make a good point, because I think anything out there can be used for plus and a negative. And I think that's where, for me, going back and looking at these types of disciplines, is that they bring you more to the center.
Right.
And I think that's, to me, has always been the most valuable lesson, is that everything is a plus and a minus, but it's the center, the balance is where it's really happening.
And that constant checking in. Anybody can let their ego take control of the steering wheel. Anybody can, with the best of intentions. And so it's a constant checking in of yourself. Am I here for the right reasons? And what is my motivation? And if you have integrity with your choices, and you're living a heart-centered life, anything that you set your eyes on, the goals that you set your eyes on, you're working from that place. And everything that you're producing out into this world will be from that well-intended spot. And so that's another area that I try to teach my students is to be heart-centered, because when you're creating in the world, what you produce is going to be good fruits or it's going to be spoiled fruits, right?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I didn't know what we would kind of discussion we get, because I know there's so many different
Right.
directions. But I do appreciate you taking the time out. And we all have our own journeys, and I have seen and I've heard so many stories like Dr. Dispenza, Dr. DiMartini, coming back and talking about that. And I know there's a tremendous value, and I love it that you're bringing something like that out to, I guess I've always been in more of a rural area, and I always
Yeah.
think that's kind of a little bit of a harder type of area or region to sell. But I believe that it brings a lot of good qualities.
Sometimes we have
it.
to find some space.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I wanted to share one more thing with you. And as a mother of 7 now on this yoga spiritual journey, I've had to, restructure the way that I spend my time. And so not only do I offer spiritual guidance and leadership to adults, but a big part of what I do is heartfelt project called iSense. iSense is my kids' yoga program, and the idea is that when we are in our 5 senses, and we are present, right, because we're in our 5 senses, that what it does is it opens up our intuition. Okay, so a lot of the things that I teach to my yoga students that are children is seeing, hearing, tasting, listening, so that they are present, right? The more senses you get involved, the more present you are. And when you're present, your intuition grows.
I love that.
And so we do lots of crafts. We do lots of nature things out on the land where we live. We do lots of yoga, very fun meditation practices. Kids love meditative stories. So it's just a great way to introduce these concepts to kids at a very young age. And I see it in my own children when they're trying to deal with their personal problems, how quick they are to go to this bag of tools that they have that they've created for themselves through some of our practices, and manage the stress in their life, manage the big emotions in their life, in their imagination, their ability to think big and not feel so limited and small.
That's the gift of a child.
It
right?
is. It is such a beautiful thing to witness, to see them choose imagination over material possessions.
Right. And also, too, I believe, handle stressful situations from a positive manner. We know there's many negative pathways for children to go
Right.
down with to manage stress. And what a much more powerful way to deal with that in a positive way.
And the cool thing about kids is, like, as adults, we kind of already have our judgments on things established, but kids are very open-minded, and so they can easily see the way that this adds up to this, because they don't have these barriers of skepticism.
Correct.
So they're like, oh, when I did breathe, I did feel better, because they didn't walk into it going, oh, this isn't for me. This isn't going to help me.
Right.
They're very good at practicing these techniques.
You've been listening to Beyond the Adjustment, where we have conversations with other health-minded professionals to create a healthier community.